Alright, it's time for us to continue our UK adventure. In the last video, we visited Reading, Birmingham, Aberystwyth, and Cardiff. You don't need to watch that before this, but let me tell you, I loved Cardiff. I mean, it was all great, but Cardiff was amazing. In today's video, we'll be visiting Manchester, Edinburgh, Coatbridge, and London. I'm Alex, and this is a channel about urban spaces and how we can make them great for people. I stayed in Aberystwyth, Wales for about a week. While there, I took a variety of day trips, taking advantage of being in the area. And our next day trip was to Manchester. I took the train from Aberystwyth to Shrewsbury and transferred to a train that'd take me to Manchester. While my trip to Cardiff was just for the heck of it, my trip to Manchester was to meet up with my friend Scott. We've been friends for years, but we've never met in person. The internet is pretty cool. And while we're more connected than ever, I love that we're still able to find uniqueness around the world. I felt like Manchester was a pretty good example of a place that just looks like Manchester. The buildings are mostly brick and have a very industrial vibe to them. I enjoyed seeing some of the artwork around the city too. And a nice looking bike share. Should I ever return? I'll give it a go. You'll also find the city logo all over the place. One thing I loved was that in every single city I visited, there were things happening. I didn't plan to attend some cycling event in Manchester, or a rally car race in Aberystwyth, or a motocross event in Cardiff. I just happened to be there and stumbled upon the festivities. I love that cities can facilitate such random discoveries of community, but they also provide quieter places for sitting, chatting, eating, and enjoying. After chatting in this very busy park for a bit, I said goodbye to Scott and caught my train back to Aberystwyth. Back in Aber, I explored the university a bit, which, here's something great, a gender-neutral washroom. Here's something kind of sad, old gravestones basically used as a curb in a parking lot. I took a look around the ruins and architecture before enjoying a fire on the beach at sunset with my friends who kindly hosted me. Early in the morning, I took my leave to catch the train to Edinburgh, Scotland. Transport for Wales got me to Wolverhampton. From there, I transferred to an Avanti West Coast train. This was probably the nicest train I rode the entire trip. Man, I wish we could travel like this across Canada. Maybe someday. Again, these are choices we make. I arrived at a very busy Waverley station in Edinburgh and followed the crowd to escape. Edinburgh being a touristy place was immediately apparent to me. I'd be curious to know how many tourists there are for each resident. Other things I noticed were the number of buses there were. I didn't bother figuring out the system because there isn't just one transit service. Apparently one is more touristy and one is better for residents. Too complicated, didn't bother with it. Instead, I just walked everywhere. Something I liked was the park and trees built around the tracks here. The architecture was also incredible. Some of the cycling infrastructure needs work though. Paint is not infrastructure. People will park in the bike lane if they can. After wandering for a bit, I stumbled upon these massive fields, huge fields. These seemed like a great place to enjoy a sunny day like this, which, as an aside, I only packed pants and wore waterproof light boots. Big mistake. It rained only a few drops while I was on my entire trip. 0 out of 10. I went to a place people always describe as cold and gloomy, but instead it was hot and sunny. Very disappointed. But at least my hostel was great. The wayfinding was a little wacky, but understandable enough and kind of fun. At the hostel, I even made some new friends. With my new friends, I hiked up this quote-unquote mountain and checked out the Scottish National Museum, which was actually really great. And when I was there, they were in the process of returning some artifacts to First Nations people in Canada. Obviously, I loved all the walkable streets, flanked with shops and stunning architecture. I thought it was funny to see this attempt at traffic management. I loved passing through narrow alleys you'd only find on foot, and wanting to see something a little less touristy, I wandered off. I found these streets being redeveloped, this time with a pretty decent bike lane, but, where are the trees? Please tell me there are trees planned for this area. Another thing I found strange, and maybe someone from the area can explain this to me, the bike lane changes materials when it turns this corner, and then it just rides right into parking. Are the cyclists meant to join traffic at this point, and does the change in materials indicate this? If so, please let me know. I enjoyed wandering for hours, finding small, seemingly hidden places, looking at the variety in architecture, and enjoying some cooler temperatures down by the water. Something I really want to highlight is this zero waste hub. They'll teach you how to repair your things, make new things out of the old, and more. I'd love to learn more about this and see this sort of thing in more communities. Returning to the tourist area, I paid my respects to a very good boy, along with many other tourists. Before heading off to Coatbridge, I want to highlight how the old can coexist with the new in this interesting way. I just found these buildings very fascinating. Before all the other tourists woke up, I snuck off to Coatbridge via ScotRail. Coatbridge isn't far from Glasgow, but I'm stopping here to look at a gravestone, which, okay, I have a story to tell you about that, but first let's talk urbanism. Specifically, that there is no substitute for quality infrastructure. This sign is kind of cute and funny, but doesn't do much to actually keep people doing the speed limit. The curb is nice, but apparently these folks need somewhere to park. And I will say that is probably the closest I'll ever come to advocating for more parking spots. But really what I'm looking for is a more accessible sidewalk. I don't know where all these cars are going, but I'll bet many of them are going to the same place. That's the perfect place for a bus or a train. Of course, I'm not from this area, so maybe there's a better local solution. A unique solution is exactly what they've done here. This tunnel is only big enough for one vehicle at a time. So a light was placed at either end to manage that. There was a place like that back home in southwest Calgary. This bridge used to be a single lane bridge over the creek. We made it to the graveyard. So my great-great-something grandfather was a groundskeeper here, and apparently he got a pretty nice rock when he died. And I figured it would be easiest to find this stone if I asked for help. So that's exactly what I did. Unfortunately, I was told by the folks running it that they didn't have records that went far enough back for this specific stone. Is the record not right on the rocks, like in the graveyard? How do they not have access to this information? I was told to call some Scottish records department. They also did not have the records, so I called another records institution. But they're super busy and probably very underfunded, so they took my information and said they'd get back to me. A more local lady overheard me on the phone. Hearing my accent, she could tell I'm definitely not from the area. She warned that they would probably never get back to me. And it's been 5 months, and I'm still waiting by the phone. Every day, I'm waiting for this phone call. Anyway, it was a fun adventure either way. And I will say something unique and interesting that I loved about this area was this kind of almost portable looking laundromat. Kind of interesting. But that basically concludes my Scottish adventure. The next stop is London. On the train, I chatted with an interesting artist guy. And I will say for the shy who are thinking maybe I shouldn't take trains, don't worry. This was mostly me instigating the conversations with people and trying to feel out if they wanted to talk or not. Every person I talked to on the train was a willing participant. Okay, so relax. If you want to take the train but don't want to talk to somebody, I think you'll be okay. Something interesting about the train was this wayfinding for the power outlet, because all the other trains that I'd been on had the power outlets on the wall, but this one was between the seats, so I followed the directions and found the outlet. I arrived at King's Cross and loved this meeting of modern and historic architecture. Something else I loved about London was the bike lanes. Honestly, this was probably my favorite thing about London. This was awesome to see. But okay, we gotta wrap this trip up. So, Tower Bridge, way bigger in person. Walkie-talkie, just as dumb as I expected. Though this portion of the skyline isn't that bad. I loved this park. Walkable street, cool. 32 degrees, not cool. I wanted rain. I spent all summer working landscaping, and this was supposed to be a break from the hot sun. London Bridge Station, beautiful. London Bridge, meh. Bike share, good. Elizabeth Line, beautiful. Transit Museum, awesome, and I wish I had more time, but that's why I bought this book. Now, the British Museum, okay, I knew they had like stolen stuff from all over the planet, but I didn't realize just how bad it was. I will say though, I appreciated this bit of wayfinding. Shrek's Adventure, I'll admit, I'm a bit curious. Tourism, after Edinburgh and London, I might be a bit anti-tourism. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I'm off to be a tourist in Montreal. So we talked a lot about tourism in today's video, which is something I'd like to discuss more in the future. It affects how we build cities and who we build cities for. If you live in a touristy place, especially if it's one of the ones that I talked about in this video, let me know what you think about tourism. Anyways, thanks for watching.